Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I am your host, Dr. Josh Satterley, and I'm excited today to have on Eric Cressey. Eric, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Absolutely, man. So Eric, for those in the world who, I don't know how they could live this life, but if they don't know who you are, can you give everybody a little idea of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, right on. So I work as a strength and conditioning coach. It's kind of like my full-time gig, but at the same time, I do publish blogs, newsletters, speak at conferences, things like that. So definitely some, I guess, diversified approaches to my professional development. But, I
think now they refer to that as he's a thought leader.
Yeah, there's
a thought leader, Eric Cressey.
I'll take it. But we have facilities in Hudson, Mass, which is just west of Boston, and then also one in Jupiter, Florida, that opened in a few years ago as well. So really our MO is really working with baseball players. So we see guys from all 30 different organizations, trained both Cy Young Award winners last year. We see high school, college, middle school kids, you name it. So it's probably a good 80 to 85% of our clientele, but we also work with a little bit of everything. We have some NFL guys, we have pro golfers, general population folks, tennis players, you name it. So a little bit of variety in there as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, because I know as a gym owner, it's tough when you work with baseball because they only have about what feels like a week and a half off, and then they're out on the road. I mean, I was watching a game yesterday and there were in May, what was it? The Phillies and the Giants yesterday. And it showed the calendar and they had 3 days off in the entire month of May.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. And that's even scarier because the season started earlier this year. So they actually tried to give guys more days off, especially knowing that the weather is not so good. So yeah, as we joke, it's like 200 games in 230 days is a safe bet.
Pretty soon they're going to be working more days than gym owners do. It's going to be sad.
It's scary, isn't it? But it speaks to kind of how challenging it is to manage those guys. You just don't get those like breaks in the action. They're always go, go, go. So you got to really find, some lows for all those highs.
Yeah, I love that. And Eric, I'm a big fan of your approach. I think you're doing great things with these baseball players, but also like you said, you're a prolific writer and you guys put out so much content, which I think is awesome because you're on the cutting edge there. You're seeing what works and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. And even if you have a nice way of saying like, don't do this with your clients because we did it and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, we evolve. I mean, we sleeper stretched a bunch of people back in like 07, 09, and now we know that's not a great way to approach it. So I'm definitely, I have no problem being the dumbest guy in a room. In fact, I try to seek out more of those opportunities because I think it makes us better. But yeah, you evolve and, you have to admit when you're wrong. And, I think our clients notice that too. It's always actually interesting when, we have a lot of our long-term pro guys that come back each off season. We have guys that are like, hey, that's new. We like that. And they'll ask about it. And it's actually a really good way to engage them. I like for them to become, kind of active, members of the process and become advocates for themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. People want to know, they want to know the information behind it, especially when somebody's getting paid for essentially using their body at the highest level, right? They want to know exactly why you're doing it. Because there are things that seem difficult or seem goofy at first. A lot of times things seem kind of goofy, but you're like, listen, I know it seems goofy, but this will really help with that, hip mobility or whatever you're going after.
And the buy-in is better if they feel like they have an active role in it. So whether it's educating them so that they know enough to request things and, ask different questions, things like that, it's a way to kickstart that process of getting them, more involved in their own training.
Yeah. And just don't come back with the, I don't know. I just saw it on Instagram.
Yeah.
That's a horrible reason.
Yeah. And to be honest, our pro guys are not bad on that. Usually our pro guys are more like, look at this dumb stuff I saw on Instagram. It's, it's historically, everybody jokes about like the MLB hashtag no off season. And some of the videos are horrific. And we're like not featured on it at all because we're actually, what I like to think is doing quality stuff. But in many cases, it's like a joke around the gym that hashtag's so out of control because all it is, guys doing dumb stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's not just in MLB world, right? Like the amount of dumb stuff that goes on at gyms, I don't know if it's just more dumb stuff goes on there or that nobody has their cell phones out late at night when they're sitting in the garage in the Midwest with their buddy who's drinking beers and going, hey, watch this. Like there's no off season for stupidity, I guess is really the issue.
And I think it's important. Like, I don't want to like come across like a gym snob or anything like that. I think, for me, I would never discourage somebody from like going to the gym. There's so many people that don't work out or really do anything that I think the last thing we want to do is condemn those that go and do dumb stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I think on my end, like the baseball ones are hard things. I'm like, this is how you make your living. You know what I mean? Like, why would you not seek out, high quality care and direction? Don't just throw darts, like actually have a plan,
Yeah, well, I think that's the basis of all great training. I mean, we're advocating people adding it on the back of a clinic, like as a transition to long-term care. And there you, just like with your baseball guys, you got to know what the hell you're doing and why you're doing it. Because if you get somebody who's recovered from a low back injury into the gym doing the wrong things, they're going to re-injure themselves, and then they're really going to think you're dumb, and they're not going to go back to your clinic, they're not going to go back to your gym. So you lose out multiple ways. So
absolutely.
Yeah, well, you certainly have a freaking encyclopedic amount of experience in the world of gyms. I want to kind of diverge a little bit because I got some questions that, you always get asked about baseball and throwing injuries and whatnot. But from a business perspective, one thing I really want to ask you about that you've successfully done is internships.
Yeah.
I think you've really put together one of the best recognized internship, and it's certainly been successful. Where are some of your interns working a few years post internship right now to give a perspective of how well it ran?
Yeah. Eric Otter's director of performance for the Grizzlies. Connor Ryan's a physical therapist for the Phoenix Coyotes. Mike Roncarati's strength and conditioning coach for the Atlanta Hawks. He won a world championship with Golden State. So we've got, Kevin Neal, there's the San Jose Sharks. So we've got, kind of a good foothold.
Who just lost to the Vegas Golden Knights.
Ironically enough, Vegas Golden Knights strength and conditioning coach Doug Davidson, summer of 2012 intern at CSP.
Nice.
So we definitely have, we've got a foothold, NHL guys, NBA guys, and then obviously professional baseball. We have quite a few guys that have gone that route. I think what's interesting is we have a kind of a high preponderance of interns who have gone on to maybe more like sports medicine type careers, a lot of DPTs. We've had maybe a couple guys that are docs now who have gone on to med school. We had one that's a PA.
I don't want to get off the rails of the internship here, but one thing that I think is amazing about you guys is I think that there's this assumption a lot of times before anybody knows anything about training in sports that you have to go over this super high level stuff, like the most difficult exercise. Yeah. And the best in the world, yourself included, I see are masters at the lowest threshold thing. Like, can I just get you 15 more degrees of external rotation? You do that. Greg Rose does that with golfers, and it's the lower level stuff way more than I see you refining somebody's clean and jerk technique. Yeah,
exactly. We joke small hinges, swing big doors. The running joke here is that's a Cresseyism that we use. But, I think it's actually really, really important is that, a lot of times you have to separate out with, you're working with high level athletes and, a lot of times it's the basic stuff needs to be done better. You have to emotionally separate yourself from the fact that, hey, this guy's got through 200 innings in the big leagues. Like they still have fundamental things that you have to come back to. It's just maybe that you have to deliver those messages in slightly different ways. That's the the art and the science of coaching kind of coalesced.
Right. That's what makes it so quote unquote easy, right?
To the point on the internships is we have guys in the NHL, NBA, MLB. Those are very specialized, but I think there's this oversight. And I think we see a lot of people that try to chase a niche or try to be a specialist for their own. You have to be a very good generalist before you ever become a specialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't become an outstanding chiropractor if you don't have a fundamental knowledge of anatomy, right? So
right.
Prerequisites, you have to graduate to each different level. And I think that's something that we're missing a lot. Maybe it's like the internet marketing world or something like that. Everybody thinks they need to be an expert. I had a 16-year-old kid email me because he wanted me to be part of his like teleseminar series yesterday, and trying to specialize in something. It's like, this makes no sense for you. Like you need to finish high school first. Like you need to, check all.
Well, to be fair, he is the best trainer at his high school.
Exactly. There you go.
In the freshman class. I mean, for males.
The hustle for sure. But I think we do have a lot of guys that have unfortunately put the carriage in front of the horse where there's unfortunately some gaping knowledges and like their lower level skill sets that need to be shored up before you start tackling some of these really complex problems. Because a lot of times the solutions to the complex problems it's looking at a lot of different simple things and then just putting them all together.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever read was it Elon Musk's his biography? Sorry. One of his secrets to success is like, he calls it first order consequence. Like just go down to where is the issue? For example, with the Tesla, he said, how much power would it take to run this car? And they said, well, it takes this much. He goes, okay, did some quick math. He said, okay, we just need to build a battery that's that big. And they're like, well, you can't do that. Why not? Well, you just can't. And he's like, you just said like, this is how much power I need. And I just extrapolated that to, he's like, it's simple physics. I took the numbers and it works. But this perception of, oh, you can't do that. But the idea is he's a master of basic sciences. And he just knows how to, take that and actually put a rocket into space or put a man on Mars pretty soon here. But that's his, he says like, simplify it until there's no argument, and if you don't understand the basic sciences, you just can't do that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's no different. Like you think about, you have a pipe burst or something at your house and a plumber comes and turns a faucet off and charges you $200, you're like, hey, that was only 10 seconds of work. Yeah, but it was 20 years of work to understand which faucet I needed to turn off. That's why I'm worth this. So I think that's one of the things that we look at. As a great example, we had a pitcher come in yesterday. It was about 22 months post-op on a slap repair. He had 2 or 3 anchors thrown in there, and just had not come back and done well. And we really looked at a ton of different things. And you listen to him talk. We hear him say, hey, I throw a 4-seam. Sometimes it's cut. Sometimes it runs. It does erratic things day to day. He walked into a bunch of cupping marks on his upper trap. He was in scapular depression, downward rotation, which tells me they're treating a bunch of protective tension. He was super hypermobile. And while he's sitting in the waiting room, he's actually like stretching his shoulder out. So these are all really like simple concepts. Like, hey, understand why you're doing soft tissue work on something. Hey, understand why you would cut a 4-seam. What positions are you in? Do that. And like, those are basic things that, pitching coaches attack, basic things that massage therapists attack. On the training side of things, it's an easy assessment to understand a guy's hypermobile. But to put all those pieces together and realize why they're having the issues they're having is where it gets complex. So you kind of have to be a little bit of a Renaissance man before you put all those pieces together.
Yeah, that's how you lost all your hair. Was you took in so much information it pushed the hair follicles out of your brain, right? Like there was no room left for hair follicles in your head.
The truth.
So going back to the idea of an internship, I always advocate for our clients, if you have the time and you have somebody that can run one, it's a great way to get labor, but it also really sharpens your own sword because teaching what you're all about often refines your own model. Can you give some people some high level tips that you've learned along the way? I mean, you have a lot of glory there, but it didn't always start out with glory, right?
Yeah, people don't realize that, and I wrote an article, it's is your strength and conditioning internship a one-way street, which would be a very good read. And the gist of it is, you really have to put in time ahead of time. Like you have to, in fact, my business partner, Pete, and our director of performance, John, are doing all the internship interviews today for, the fall. So we, a couple of years ago, we actually had, basically like a lower admission rate than the Ivy League. It was less than 50 applicants that got accepted for like 11 spots in Florida and Mass, with well over 100 applicants. So you have to weed guys down. For us in our internship process, one of the things we have is a tripwire. So as a frame of reference, let's say you get 120 applications for this internship. And each one includes a resume. They include their references. They include their cover letter. That's 3 separate documents. So if you're my business partner, Pete, would you rather open 3 documents in every email or 1? So we always say to them, submit your information as a 1 document PDF. It's bolded, it's highlighted, it's underlined, it's in bright red on the directions. And 40% of applicants don't do it. And it literally is like, it's the hugest tripwire ever. Just like, somebody spells something wrong, types in all lowercase, things like that are just like a mark of no professionalism, no attention to detail. And so like when we have those big applicant pools, we will actually, markedly pare back on stuff based purely on that. And yes, we probably missed out on some good candidates over the years, but for me, that's like a tripwire. It's a way for us to get right to people who follow directions incredibly well, because those people that follow directions well, they're going to take on what comes next even better. And it's a 10-week online curriculum. Basically it goes through everything from our assessments to, various, here's how you coach anterior core drills. Here's some of the scapular controls. Here's a presentation on pitching injuries and, the etiology of slap tears. So we get them accustomed to this population, and it ends really with how to build rapport with clients so that they're comfortable on that first day, having conversations. And they also get oriented to our programming templates and everything. It's very sequential. And as they're going through that, there's about 750 exercises that we expect them to have reviewed before they show up on day 1. And there are a few that they may not see over the course of their internship, but they're expected to review it. And honestly, we'll we'll challenge them on day one. We'll ask them some randoms, and usually the ones that are very self-explanatory, like, hey, split stance, one arm cable row, show it to us. And, if we find somebody's not like up to snuff, they haven't studied hard enough, we'll make them observational only. We'll say, you're not coaching anybody here until you've demonstrated a level of proficiency. This happened twice in our internship where we've said, you're not on the floor today. You're going to go into the staff lounge and you're going to study this because you showed unprepared, because it's not fair to your peers that they worked hard to prepare themselves and you're going to have the same opportunities that they do. So we
guys play at the highest levels, man. I mean, like, you got people walking the floor that, a stupid low grade injury from doing the wrong exercise is literally has an ROI that could be in the $1 million, right? Like,
and I think for us too is, we don't put them in positions where they can really fail early on. Like it's pretty hard to screw up, like teaching foam rolling or, maybe going through some warm ups and things along those lines. And, so we're not going to give them that, clients who have substantial injury histories. We ease them into that over the course of time. But, we very much believe that if you do things well up front, you have a good orientation, you put them in positions to be successful. And I think there's also, what's kind of nice about that is I think a lot of people come in very appreciative. They realize, like, hey, we just went through this 10-week online course that you prepared for us. And I learned more in this than I did during my 4-year exercise science degree. Like,
for sure. For sure.
The level of buy-in and, they want to do a good job, especially knowing like we hire almost exclusively from our internship program.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where in many cases it's a trial run for being successful.
Yeah, that allow them to perform in front of you with a closed end and say, hey, it didn't work out, is a great way as a business owner to know if you got the goods, right?
The other thing I would tell you too is, like, think about, you mentioned, internships are, they're free labor or whatever you may be, but they're also, it's a way to evaluate something that's hard to evaluate. Let's say Josh, you're out in Vegas. Let's say you want to hire a guy from Tennessee. He's got an amazing resume. You call all his references. He answers all these awesome questions from the interview. Like, you've evaluated competency. He's gonna be able to coach. You haven't evaluated fit. You don't know what a guy from like backwoods Tennessee is gonna do when he goes onto like the strip in Vegas for the first time. Like, he might be a deer in headlights. He might not coalesce with your clients. That's, and if you look at culturally, our Massachusetts and Florida facilities are very similar in some ways, but the demographics are substantially different in terms of, like, case in point, we open at 9 a.m. on Saturday in both locations. Our Massachusetts facility, it could be 10 inches of snow on the ground at 8:45 on a Saturday morning, and there'll be 25 clients waiting at the door. Whereas our Florida facility, you walk in at 9, it's crickets, and they just kind of start to trickle in at like 9:45. Like, we'll occasionally just do a staff in service first thing because there's nobody there yet, and it's just a different world altogether. They roll in a little bit later in Florida, so you have to evaluate not just competence, you have to evaluate fit, and an internship is amazing for that. How do they jive with your staff? How do they handle themselves over an extended period of time? And then our clients will be like, this guy's awesome. You should definitely try to keep him around. That's what means a lot to us.
Yeah. I heard a guy say, if he said, think about when you're hiring somebody, there's no way that if you had a band and you needed a new guitarist, you could get all the resumes.
Cut off for a second there. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. So there's a guy saying if you were hiring a new band member and you needed a guitarist, you get all the applications and resumes. There's no way you would let him not audition. You would have to hear him play the guitar, right? Yeah. And a lot of people forget about that, like you're saying, and certainly an internship allows that to happen. So it's awesome.
But even beyond that, like, you're also, if you're a touring band, you've got to go on the road with that guy. Yeah. How bad is it going to be if he's a great guitarist, but he's an absolute pain in the butt on the tour bus and the hotel, all that? Like, you really have to critically evaluate that. So for us, 3 to 5 month internship, like, we get to spend a lot of time. We get to know you well and, kind of see how you fit in with everything.
Now that's how long your internship lasts. So it's, what'd you say, 10 weeks before they step in the building, 10 weeks of online education. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then they step in, and how long does it typically last?
It'll vary a little bit. The spring internship tends to be the longest. That goes January 2nd through Memorial Day. Summer is the shortest, Memorial Day based to Labor Day. And then, the fall one is going to be basically September 1st up until, effectively like a few days before Christmas.
Wow.
You have like a little like middle time, like between Christmas and New Year's. That's always interesting in terms of being a little short staffed. So we'll often call former interns in to help coach and stuff. But that's awesome.
Definitely. And how many hours a week are they typically putting in education versus actually on the floor working?
Yeah. What I would say is in terms of on the floor, like our full-time coaches work 33 hours. So historically we've had our interns be expected to do the same. And they get a few different things. Like we run our strength camps with our adult clients 5:30 to 10:30 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So those are, early morning. So if someone comes in and does strength camp, they can leave early for the day. Otherwise we're 12 to 7, at least at our Massachusetts facility. Our Florida facility gets going at 10. So, it just depends on kind of which block they go to. So there's that. We also run, there's 2 separate in-services each week, depending on which facility you're in there. In Florida's is Tuesdays and Massachusetts Wednesdays. But before we open up on Wednesdays, 11 to 12 is staff in-service. So that's one of our staff members presenting on something. We may have guest speakers come in, on everything from, Lou Schuler came in and talked about writing in the fitness industry. We've had doctors come in and speak about surgeries. So we cover a million different things. And then on Friday, actually, one of these, John O'Neill, who's our internship coordinator in Massachusetts, he'll do like a separate 1-hour presentation on, a topic of whatever it may be. The other thing we actually do, we started this 2 semesters ago and it's been incredibly successful, is instead of doing like this, 4 or 5 hour, like kind of orientation on day one, when they get here, we do 30-minute like blocks for the first 12 days. And we've actually had really, really good success with that. So basically we open at 11:30 to 12. It's John and, 4 or 5 interns. And today we're going over chops and lifts. And then next time we're going over rollouts and fallouts. Next day we're going over deadlift. Next day we're going over single leg. And they attack some kind of big, bold topic in a lot of detail. They go over, here are the coaching keys we like to use. And that's been actually a game changer for us. People don't do well when you kind of have them drink through the fire hose. They seem to do a little bit better when you give them like bite-sized pieces over the course of a couple weeks.
Oh yeah. I can tell you that from experience, man. We did a half hour to hour long. And the other thing is you plan out so much education sometimes, and what you end up covering is the first line in your outline, and you never get past that. And you're just like, geez, I didn't know this was so much. But again, it refines what you're doing and helps you even think through some of those things. So,
and I think, we've realized that more and more, like people don't read like long form blogs anymore. They want 500 to 700 words. They're more involved on Instagram, Twitter. And like, you can think about like, we met up for the first time at SFMA, which is an amazing, you think about like, if you could have taken each one of those, hey, we're just going to do 30 minutes on cervical screens today. Mm-hmm. And throw that at them. They conceptually have time to go over it. Like it's bite-sized pieces, so it's obviously not convenient when you have people from traveling from all over a 2 or 3 day period. But, in the short term, like you can make very, very impactful changes with people. You give them a really like a ton of stuff and a really specific topic.
Are you a chiropractor or physical therapist working long hours, worrying about lower repayments and missing out on quality time with your family? You can double your income without working more hours by adding a gym to your practice. Clinic Gym Hybrid Solutions has a step-by-step guide that dramatically simplifies and speeds up the addition of a fitness center and its monthly recurring revenue. In just 6 months, you can be on your way to freedom. Visit clinicgymhybrid.com today for a free downloadable PDF and complimentary consultation to get you started. That's clinicgymhybrid.com.
And going back, you said that there's the art and the science of it. And talking about the art, what have you learned when you have interns? It's not just rote information, right? It's not just present the information, they process it, but how do you support them? How do you challenge them? How do you push them a little bit? Maybe create some uncomfortable moments on purpose? Do you have them get up in front of the room to speak, things like that? Any tips you have there?
Yeah, to be honest, I tend to observe a lot in the first week. One of the things that we've found too is separating me from it has actually made it a lot better. Whether it's justified or not, there are a lot of guys that, because it's Cressey Sports Performance, there are guys like on day one that are like legitimately like afraid to coach in front of me. Like they get a little like white coat hypertension, and I'm like, I try to be like the most easygoing guy in the world, but I think they put a lot of pressure on themselves. So honestly, I try to stay busy and I try to just observe from afar a little bit more. I try to make them comfortable, obviously asking about themselves and things like that. But it's
like in Scooby-Doo episodes where the guy who's really the villain is like cleaning the windows and stuff, looking at him from the side, like viewing. I've seen it. Yeah.
And, and to be honest, I defer to John here and Tim in Florida as kind of our internship coordinators to really take the lead on stuff. So, the last thing I want is for them to get mixed messages. So if I see things that I think, they can work on, a lot of times I'll actually dictate it to either John or Tim and have them kind of be the kind of the delivery people. It's like if a Major League Baseball general manager wants something changed, like he doesn't drive to the AA affiliate and say, hey, I need you to take the ball to the glove sooner. Like he's going to dictate that to his minor league coordinator, who's going to speak to the infield coach or, pitching coach or whatever it may be to make things kind of happen. So, we're not that big a business. I need to be crazy separate from it. But I think in the early stages, that's something I've done differently in recent years. And I think it's really, really important. That's the other thing is that I think what's become challenging for me, with our internships, I certainly get to know them as best I can, but there's some that I don't get to interact with very much. Being split between Florida and Massachusetts, I might spend 3 to 4 weeks with them. So we have guys that are responsible as the internship coordinators because they can usually attack a lot of this mentorship stuff better than I can. It becomes challenging too, where I'll get like 5 or 6 requests each week for letters of recommendations or calls from colleges that are looking to hire guys. So I do try to I don't want to say delegate. I try to empower those guys, and it's part of their job descriptions.
Nice. It's you're always such a great guy. I mean, that's one quality that's always come through. I remember reading an article you wrote that was one of the agents told you that he loved working with you just because you actually get back to people and you're actually nice about it.
We try. You want to get along well with everybody, and it's very hard. I think you can probably speak to this, a ton. You had a family, you got a thriving business, and you're doing different things, right? You're consulting, you're doing podcasts, you're treating patients, you're trying to stay on top of your continuing education, you're speaking at seminars. Like there's a lot of competing demands for your time and attention, and you have to learn how to say no to some people, and but you never want it to be perceived the wrong way. So you have to kind of do it delicately. But for us, hiring good people, empowering them. It's been one of the lessons I've learned over the course of time. So, that's something we've definitely done differently.
By the way, have you had a conversation with somebody saying so I'll just give you an example. The first time I took a golf lesson from the Harmon School from a pretty high-end instructor, he jokingly opened up the drawer, pulled out an envelope and handed me 2 gift certificates for bowling. And he said, I don't know if golf is your thing, man. But in all seriousness, have you had interns that end your program and you go, either this isn't for you or, maybe you need to refine some skills or let me provide you some resources, but don't go into gym setting right away?
I think you definitely maybe steer people in those directions. I think there are conversations about things that are changeable, or, that people can modify. Those are usually easy conversations. Just giving them, advice on how to build rapport with clients, how to coach certain exercises, all that stuff I think is very, very easy. I think the harder ones, like you can't teach work ethic. If someone is inherently drawn to, taking shortcuts and things like that, those are hard dynamics. Over the entire course of our internship, we've only had to fire 1 intern. And this is going back to 2007. So I think that's a testament to basically selecting guys ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a couple of interns that have had to leave, for various situations, deaths in the family and, other situations like that. But, for the most part, I would say that we're really over 90%, positive outcomes. Where I do think it is a little bit challenging is you have people for sure who, they're maybe not at least in our eyes, a perfect fit for the job that they want to have, right? They want to be done here and they're like, hey, I want to go work in pro sports. And you're like, my gosh, you're going to get eaten alive. Something along those lines. Or, you see someone that gets deer in headlights in front of a large group and they say they want to go do group training. You'd be really good as a personal trainer, or, working in a physician's extender, a clinical population. This is really outside your comfort zone. So, I think you try to be as direct as you possibly can. You say, here are the things that you need to do to work on that. We do our best to kind of nurture that, kind of involvement over the course of their time here. But you're right. There are definitely situations where you have to give people brutal honesty. The other one that's really hard, honestly, is, we've kind of been busy enough that now, when we're talking about some of these higher level jobs, we're getting calls from pro organizations and colleges. There are times when I have multiple former interns applying for the same job. And it's kind of this ethical dilemma. You also have interns that maybe were good, not great. And you have to be really honest about where they are, because the biggest concern is what happens if you give a recommendation for someone that wasn't top notch. It's that next time, they're going to remember that. So those are really, really hard discussions to have. So
I know there's a famous radio producer in Phoenix, Arizona, that told Jimmy Kimmel, listen, you're a behind the mic guy. Do not get in front of the camera. You'll never succeed. So
yeah,
maybe it was because he got shit canned a couple times that he improved, or maybe that guy was a bad talent scout. You never know. but there's always those tough decisions. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people look back and go, oh, that's, I wish I would have hired so-and-so at that point.
It's funny you say that, because when I was finishing my grad degree in 2005, I actually remember emailing with Jason Ferrugia. And at the time, Jason had his gym in New Jersey before he closed it. And kind of going back and forth about just kind of the industry. And, one of the things Jay said that really, really resonated with me is like, you're not worth what you think you're worth. You're worth what someone will pay you. It's like, you think you have this remarkable skill set, but unless you come in and you add value to a business, you grow that business, you do something to make it more profitable, you make it a better experience for clients. Like, it doesn't matter what you think you're worth. It doesn't matter how much you invested in school or what classes you took or what studies you published or anything like that. Like that. And I think that's actually a big issue right now. You have a lot of people that think that they have way more reach, way more to offer, way more value than they do. And we both know, like, it takes time to get to that point.
Yeah, I guess this would be a good time to let you know this podcast only has about 3 listeners, dude. So I hope you weren't hoping for a big exposure.
It's all good. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah. Hey, I want to move on, but before we move on, you said that you wrote a really good article about the internship program and kind of what you've learned. Where can people find that?
If you go to ericcressey.com or just Google it, it's Is Your Strength and Conditioning Internship a One-Way Street is what it's called. Okay,
cool. And that should be pretty easy to find on the blog. Okay, yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, I know that there, like I said, there are so many facets of what you've done well. Let me go after something that I've never heard you speak of publicly, but I'd love to get your opinion. When you got a young trainer and you've got a high-end client, and I know that a lot of people listening here, they're going to have some, when you have a clinic in a gym, you just happen to sometimes you get the best athletes in your area. Yeah. I'm in Las Vegas and we've worked with some of the best athletes that live out here. And I'm sure that happens everywhere. What tips do you have for people, so you don't become a total fanboy blubbering over your words, but when you are working with high-end clients, what tips would you have? And maybe you give this out in your internship to work with the highest of the high.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would tell you is just remember that, at the end of the day, they're normal people, right?
Everybody says that, but that's really hard when you're staring at somebody you've only seen on the TV,
It really is. So it's funny. I literally, while we're talking, I just pulled this up. I did a presentation, 11 tips for building and managing a professional athlete clientele. So the first thing I would say is just, like I said, they're normal guys, keep that in mind as you work through stuff. But, we always talk a lot about adding value instead of extracting value, particularly if you have individuals who are being compensated very well. Like we have multiple clients who are worth over $200 million, and who are, got that way because of playing baseball. And what you realize is there's also, there's a big tendency for people around them to always try to extract value. Like, hey, we can charge them whatever because they're, price insensitive. Our big league guys, Max Scherzer, who has a $215 million contract, pays exactly what our other big league guys pay. There's no difference because of him being compensated at that level, him being maybe the best pitcher on the planet, whatever it is. So I think guys recognize that. Certainly you probably leave a lot of value on the table, but I think you sleep a lot better at night knowing you're a good human being. You're not, just trying to take advantage of people. That's sadly uncommon. You see a lot of people in our industry, unfortunately, kind of raking, pro athletes who have a high net worth over the coals. I think another thing is being accessible. I think one of the things that they teach us in this industry is that, we work while others play. And there are going to be times when you have to take a phone call from a pro baseball player at 10:30 at night after a game, right? You have to be, available to them, because they have markedly different work hours. I think for me, especially in the baseball world, one of the things that I do really, really well is I'm unconditionally positive. In baseball, if you fail 70% of the time, you're one of the best players on the planet. Like, playing a pro sport is hard. Like you're very, very elite, just from a pure percentage standpoint. And it's even harder to stay there. They don't need more negativity in their lives. And you actually talk to a lot of our guys, the managers they hate are the guys that are unconditionally negative. Like, be positive. And to me, energy is a lot different than charisma. You don't have to be this rah-rah yelling across the gym in their face guys, but a lot of times it's asking about how their family's doing or getting to know them on a personal level, because that's a way to show that they care.
Dude, I just got to tell a story here. Yeah, I had a private client working with him at his house. and he was making, when I looked at, about $12 million a year, and it was right when signing was happening. So he was really watching what teams were taking what players from free agency, because it was going to be the difference between, like, is he going to, add a lot of money to his contract? Is he going to, like, and I can't describe it. I'm sure you've seen this, but you see so much angst on these guys when they're worried about that. I mean, it's like a 5-day run of like the highest stress. Yeah. I can only equate it to like finding out if you got into grad school or something. Like, they're just so stressed out. But I said, all right, man, let's forget all that shit. Let's talk about your kids. And it was like the guy like exploded. Oh man, I got to tell you, like, and he ran to his kitchen and he pulled down this like coloring thing his daughter had made in preschool. And it's like, what just happened there? Like, it was a huge switch. But to your point, it was like, I touched on the human side, not the business side, or whatever you want to call that, and he just totally exploded from there. The workout was great. So I love your idea of being unconditionally positive. Yeah.
Well, so, and the thing I like, we see it every year. That's hilarious. You see that from basically December 1 until end of January. That's the case. Like, if you see a guy walking around in front of CSB on his phone, like, he's probably on the phone with his agent. Like, we had guys get traded in the middle of training sessions, stuff like that. So, have you ever had anybody find out, like, on TV that let something happen? Like, oh, you'd be amazed at some of this stuff. You guys will hear from teammates and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the worst. Or social media, they find out something. Yeah, it happens pretty commonly. One of the things that actually is really, I think, important too is, like, you have to talk about something other than their sport. Like, for the fanboys in the crowd, like, oh my God, you play professional baseball. That's so cool. They're usually sick of baseball by the time the offseason rolls around, right? And I did the math on it. Like, average guy, might be at the ballpark for 12 hours a day for 200 days over the course of it's 2,400 hours. That's the average American works 1,700 hours per year. So you have to ask, like, do you think accountants want to come home and talk about accounting on weekends? Like, no. And that doesn't mean that they're apathetic to their job, but they'd rather talk about fantasy football. They'd rather talk about the golf round they played or something like that. By the way, that accountant just traveled via bus with a bunch of other accountants to get on a plane with a bunch of other accountants to fly to an accounting conference and have lunch with accountants. And, everybody's asking about accounting. I love that. Yeah, that's a good tip. I think on our end, specialization has been really good, finding that niche. Guys want you to be their competitive advantage. It's hard to do that if you're training every Joe and Jane, out there. In some cases, you need to walk away from other opportunities. That may be competing in one direction or another. I got a buddy in Montana who's the number one chiropractor for bull riders and rodeo cowboys in Montana. That's amazing. Now, yeah, it is, because like, no matter what he did, I don't think he can compete in the world of baseball with you, Eric. Like, just geographically, he's smoked, right? But what do you have? And one of the things about his place is, man, you got to know your market. Like, literally in drawers, they have Copenhagen, because like, that is a part of cowboy life if there ever is one, So if they ask you, hey, you got Cope, it's like, that's their pre-workout shooter, right? Is drop some Cope. Here's an interesting one too. Trained families, not athletes. Like, people don't realize how big a deal it is to get. I mean, obviously we love to have players' wives and kids come into the facilities. But you think about our facility, like in Jupiter, right? Like, we've had multiple people who drop their lives and move across the country as a place to train. And in many cases, there's a spouse that is like along for the ride, and yes, they're compensated well, but that means they've got to race to find housing. They've got to find, things that their newborns can do. Like, they've got to find like social outlets, things like that. Like, they're lonely, man. Our daughter's 3rd birthday in November was basically like a Major League Baseball party. There were 3 or 4 guys that were there that were like so fired up for a 3-year-old birthday party. Like, they were more excited than you could possibly imagine. And, like, your families play into these geographic decisions of how you build your business. It's also super helpful, obviously, to get the spouse involved on the nutrition side of things and, lifestyle decisions about not, go out and drinking and staying out late all the time. So that's one of the things I learned really early, is that we don't just train players, we train families. And you realize that when the family is not on board, it's markedly harder. There are a lot of competing demands in many cases. So we want them to be involved in the mix. And I actually write programs for a few wives of our players. We have some that
nice
with us at our facility.
Do you sell that? Sorry, on the front end, like when you have somebody come in and membership, do you just bring it up then? Like, when do you kind of weave in, hey, what about your wife, kids?
Yeah, I think it's a casual conversation. I don't think we push it. I mean, certainly I think where we're able to help them along is like when they're looking at coming to the area, we have real estate connections where we kind of getting the ball rolling, like, and even just like simple things like our Florida facility, there's a free zoo a quarter mile away. Like literally, like we've had times when guys have come in and done an eval with us and their wife takes their 2-year-old to the zoo and they see Florida Bears and Panthers and all this stuff and like stuff like that, giving them restaurant recommendations, all that is important. I wouldn't say we hard sell it on day one. We certainly, inquire and, tell them, hey, we run strength camps in the morning. Your wife might like that. Try to introduce them to other people in the area. But
it's funny. We had a professional athlete move to our area and, my wife and I sat down and just talked to them about preschools. And that was like their stress point, it's like, and it's just like, of all the things you think like, cause there's, their agent will help them with real estate sometimes and, find a broker and all that stuff. But you forget there's all these things about integrating into a new community that are tough. So that's awesome that you guys do that.
It's interesting too. One of the things I say also as well, and this is really important, is don't abuse your professional relationship. So as a frame of reference, this week I've gotten 2 emails from people around the country who I know are good people who have asked me if I can get signed memorabilia for silent auctions. One of them's in Seattle. He's a great guy. We've been friends for a long time. And, if it would be very, very easy if it was like, hey, you need a Corey Kluber autographed ball and you asked me in December or January, it's like the easiest thing in the world. Like Corey Kluber's in Ohio right now. I'm in Massachusetts. That's Seattle. If he's going to sign a ball, like there's a lot of hoops to jump through, to get it there. So we really
sure he just wasn't looking for a signed Cressey shirt signed by Eric Cressey?
Exactly.
I mean, at a silent auction, that's going to bring some serious coin, baby.
But the one that's actually the most challenging in the baseball world. So as a frame of reference, players in spring training games and in the minor leagues can leave tickets at no charge. So if you want to go to a Las Vegas 51s game, I can make sure you have tickets that night. And it's very, very easy. The second those New York Mets players go to the big leagues and want to leave tickets, they have to pay taxes. They're treated as compensation. So if you're a player in the highest tax bracket and you leave an $80 ticket in friends and family, that's like them just handing you $40. And in many cases, people will be like, hey, can you get so-and-so to leave me tickets? And it's like, no, you're asking me to make a big ass. Like you're literally asking me to steal money out of this person's wallet. So, I never pay for I never ask for tickets from our guys. If they leave us tickets, I send them a Venmo. Like I pay for all my tickets. I'm really adamant about that because it gives me separation. So I can say, hey, I appreciate you asking, but just so you know, our players do have to pay on this stuff. Where I can maybe help you out is if you go to the game, I could get you some BP passes, stuff like that. But I'm very cognizant of not wearing guys out because I think they get hit up for that stuff enough. And it's also challenging. You got to bring your whole staff on board with it because you've got a staff of 9 and they all interact with you. And, the Mets come to Miami to play the Marlins and Noah Syndergaard's pitching. Like, I don't want Noah to have to leave a dozen tickets for all of our staff and their spouses and everything like that. So you have to definitely set some boundaries about, how that works. Even though those guys are great and I know they do it, I hate asking for it because it's an ask, you know what I mean? And you got too many of those and it adds up.
Yeah. It's and time, when you have 2 days off in a month, time for a phone call is precious. I mean, it's, that's a quote unquote free thing, but their time is so precious to be with their families and whatnot. Man, this is all great. This is amazing stuff, Eric. I really appreciate you taking the time with us to share this. I know that I only got you for a couple more minutes. I just want to make sure that we're, I heard that you hold the world record for something, that you are the highest vertical jump for an old white dude who had no vertical jump in high school. Is this true?
Yeah. And actually there's a funny story behind it. You've obviously seen the picture or the video. What's actually hilarious about that, I did it on a Wednesday afternoon and I rolled out of bed Friday morning and I had like the worst pec minor strain in history. Like I did it with no warm up and violent reaching for a guy in pretty good scapular anterior tilt. It was amazing. It took like 36 hours to kick in, but it took like a good 3 weeks to calm down. So
that wasn't just from going around the gym high-fiving everybody for your awesome performance.
The funny joke is that I strained a boob jumping. That's how athletic I am.
Yeah, but I just, because there are some people who go to the gym. What was your vertical jump in high school so people have some context here? You had it measured, right?
I mean, I'll say this. I was a 4'11" by 4'11" freshman. I was a very underwhelming high school athlete. So I don't think I'd even had it tested, but I'd be shocked if it was over 18 or 19 inches.
Okay. And how old are you now?
36.
So 20 years later, basically 20 years of some smart training and periodic max effort deadlifting and everything else. And what did it measure out at?
Like 37 and change, give or take. So yeah.
So doubled in 20 years, huh?
Yeah, actually, it was really funny. There's kind of a funny story about that. I got into powerlifting, and I was like a 545 squatter in the 165 class. And I had a 23-inch vertical jump. I was like, clearly this training is not carrying over. And I just started doing a little more sprinting, a lot more jumping is just as part of warm-ups and trying to be more athletic. And literally a year and a half later, I jumped 35, just like without really prioritizing it. It was just like
27 to 35,
23 to like 35 in about a year and a half.
I mean, adding 12 inches at anything is going from 18 to 30 would be great, but you went even higher than that.
It's a really interesting perspective just on there. A lot of people that have a lot of force that they just don't know how to tap into because they haven't trained to utilize it. So
that's the best client to get in a gym, by the way, is if you have somebody that doesn't know what their potential is and you just like give them a little window to it. They're like, that was different. You're like, oh yeah, that happens all the time.
We always say it's easier to make a fast guy strong than it is to make a strong guy fast. But in that case, apparently it was easy to make a strong guy fast. I don't run well, but I can jump.
You know what I do is I put it on a timeline and then compare when you got married and then go to your wife and be like, babe, I just want you to know I wasn't fast until I met you. Probably win you some points. Hey, Eric, just as we wrap up here, 5 resources or mentors or information you think is worth people checking out if they're so most of my listeners are just starting or just about to start a gym.
Okay.
So any 5 resources you think are worthwhile?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a homer one because his office is 3 doors down from mine. My business partner, Pete, it's PeteDupuis.com, DUPUIS. Pete does a ton of stuff in the fitness industry. Lots of different components, but heavy business orientation. Pete's stuff is outstanding. Alan Cosgrove does an excellent job on the business of fitness as well. I think some of his stuff is great. Thomas Plummer's a guy who's been around in a long time in the fitness space from a consulting standpoint. So some of his early books, even just like the chapters on lease negotiation, stuff like that, I think are really worth their weight in gold. I really like Pat Rigsby. Pat's a guy I talk to pretty regularly. I think Pat's a good dude. He doesn't tell you, here's the system you need to use. He listens to you and helps kind of you lead yourself to those decisions. So that's 4. I'll give you a great book by Chip and Dan Heath. One's a psychologist at Stanford, and one's at Duke. They're brothers. It's called Decisive. It's how to make good decisions, kind of in business and in life. So probably the best business book I've read in an extended period of time.
Yeah, I read a Harvard Business Review, and it said that the number one quality in the highest performing CEOs was the speed at which they can make a decision, which sounds ridiculous, like that would be a factor, but it's so hard in business, especially as you're expanding and growing. Decisions have weight and you're worried about them and they take emotion. And so I think that's a great resource. I appreciate that. So all those folks, I've never personally talked with Pat Rigsby, but everybody else I've personally talked to and would 100% vouch for. So I'm glad you brought them all up. They're all amazing. And you certainly, you're one of them too, buddy. So yeah. I appreciate all the information you share with the world and that you provide. And I look forward to everything that's going on. What is in the future for you? Anything big coming up?
Actually filming a new shoulder course this month. So getting ahead on the game there, trying to use this 3 weeks of downtime between when all the pro guys take off and when all the college guys get here to just try to have a little bit more long-term planning, but busy summer of training college guys for sure. And then back to the pro grind once mid-September rolls around.
Awesome. Well, it looks like everything's going well for you. I'm very excited. Congrats on the second location being incredibly fruitful. And thank you very much for taking the time today, Eric. For people who want to check out your blog or find you or find more information, where can they go to find you?
EricCressey.com is the website. And then it's just at Eric Cressey on both Twitter and Facebook and Instagram.
Nice. And I love the, if you get on Eric's Instagram on Fridays, he has a little t-shirt competition with his workout buddies. It's always pretty exciting.
Never a dull moment at our facility. You got to keep it fun, right?
There you go. Well, Eric, on behalf of my listeners and behalf of Clinic Gym Radio, let me say thank you. And this is Dr. Josh Satterley with Eric Cressey saying, go out there, maximize your license, and live the life you dream of. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for listening to Clinic Gym Radio. If you're ready to double your profit without working longer hours, please visit clinicgymhybrid.com and find out how easy it is to get started on your path to freedom. That's clinicgymhybrid.com.